Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you, Father. I thank you, Abba Yahuwah, that even though we see how the enemy is just trying to bring more and more darkness upon this earth, and how we are starting to hear of wars and rumors of wars, and there is pestilence, there is disease, and there is darkness of things approaching, but famines coming our way. But I just want to thank you, Father, that in the midst of everything, that we can be a lamb in your hands, knowing that we are so reliant on you as our shepherd, because you are the one that has the water, the milk, the food that you are to be able to give us to drink. Without you, what would we be and where would we be? You are the one who provides. You are the one who will nurture us. And even if our earthly parents or people or tribes or group will reject us, you will never reject us. You will embrace us. You will love us. You will show us your love. You will lead us in the way that we ought to go. And it doesn't matter what man does to us, because we know that our Master Shepherd is always there to take care of us. And Father, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you because in the midst of the storms of life that will come, and even when the world turns against us, there will always be a shepherd to protect us. And so I thank you, Abba Father, for your love, for your grace, for your mercy, for the many lessons that you are teaching us in this time. As truly you are wanting us to be able to bear fruit. You are pruning us in this time, as we are in this time of preparation. And I have understood a very valuable lesson over the last few days from last week, that if we are not pruned, we cannot bear fruit. But Abba Yahuwah, we are such spoiled brats that many times when you're wanting to prune us, we will pray every little thing away, because we're not wanting to surrender and die to our flesh. But I just want to thank you, Abba Yahuwah, because as we read through these scriptures and as we work through your word, we understand more and more your heart and how you go about things. If Joseph didn't go through his pruning process of everything that he had to go through with his brothers, and then what he had to suffer at the hand of Potiphar, and then what he had to go through in the jail, if all that pruning process did not take place, he could not come and bear the greatest fruit, to be able to be in a place of refuge for your people for a time. And I want to thank you, Abba Father, as we will come to an end of Genesis tonight. What an awesome journey it has been. Oh, Father, I just want to thank you. I thank you for so many lessons that we have learned throughout the book of Genesis. How can anyone read only the New Testament and not come and read our foundational covenant? Because I truly have understood one thing. It's all about covenant. You are about covenant. You are a covenant relationship Abba Father, you want covenant with your people because it's all about relationship. And covenant is about intimacy. Covenant is about betrothal. Covenant is about a marriage. Covenant is about a commitment. Covenant is a marriage. And this is what you require of us. You're wanting not just to be able to have a people that will just come and, wow, they have to seek you for the next thing and the next thing. But do they really seek you because of a love relationship that is there? And these are the many lessons that you are teaching me at the moment, Father. And I just want to thank you, because it's not just about having a father, but it's about understanding that we are being prepared for a marriage. But that marriage is going to take a responsibility on our side of what we need to do. And Abba Yahuwah, I just thank you that you will prepare your people. I pray that you truly prepare us, that we will not be rebellious and that we will not be stubborn, but that we will be those that will be yielded and submitted to you in order for us to be able to bring glory and honor to your name in everything that we do. And so, Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank you. I thank you for all that you are teaching us in this time. I praise and I thank you for this in Yeshua's name. Amen. Amen. So praise Abba Father as we continue to look at our tribes and how exciting it is, because every one of these tribes is really reflecting the future, because whatever is being spoken here is already reflecting into the future in terms of what is going to come out of that tribe. So last week we really looked at Reuben, and we looked at Reuben being the firstborn and the power and the beginning of my strength and excellency and exaltation and power. But he was boiling like water, and the curse over him was that you do not excel because you went to your father's bed. Then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. And so we had a look and we saw that Reuben was the firstborn, and he was supposed to have walked in the firstborn blessing. But Reuben means behold a son. But you see, at the end of the day, he went and defiled his father's bed, and we saw that in Genesis chapter 35, verses 22, where Reuben went and slept with Bilhah, and she was Rachel's maidservant. And so because of that, he defiled his father's bed. And so you can see that Reuben was given to a spirit of lust. That so great was the lust that was in him that he had no problem in taking his father's concubine, which at the end of the day was still his father's wife. She bore him children, but Reuben went and slept with her. And so because of this, we see that Jacob declares a curse on him where he says he boils over. So, when a pot is boiling over, it boils over the water. And so he was boiling over with lust. And because of that, he went and slept with his father's wife. Then we had a look at Shimon. And Shimon means heard, to hear, to listen, to obey. It's listen and obey is Shema. It comes from the word Shema. Shimon comes from Shema, which means to listen and obey. And so then there is Levi, joined to. And so what was spoken, and so Shimon and Levi were together because they were the two brothers that really were destructive together two brothers that went and created destruction. And so he says of them, so Shimon means to shamar, listen and obey, and Levi means join to. And so Genesis 49 verses 5 to 7, he says, they brothers, their weapons of implements of violence. Let my being not enter their council, let my esteem not be united to their assembly, because they killed a man in their displeasure, and they lamed an ox in pleasure. Cursed be their displeasure, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I divided them in Yaakov and scattered them in Israel. And so at the end of the day, we had a look and we see that Levi, that anger of Levi definitely comes down, because if we look and see, Moses comes from what tribe? Moses comes from the tribe of Levi. And that same anger caused Moses to eventually murder a man when he sees the Egyptian whipping and almost killing an Israelite slave. He takes vengeance and decides to kill him with his bare hands. And so you see that that seems to have passed down with Levi. But yet at the end of the day, Father used Levi, because we had a look and we saw in Exodus chapter 33, when Moses comes down from the mountain, and now they build the golden calf in Exodus 32. They built the golden calf, and so Moses in his anger comes down, breaks those commands that the Father's just given him. But that had to be, because the first had to be broken, because the second was going to be written on the tablets of our heart. So those second ones was the ones that went into the Ark of the Covenant, which he knew we were going to break the first commandment the first commands that was going to be given. We were not going to be able to keep those commands. And already on Mount Sinai, we chose not to listen. And so there was going to be a second lot made, and those were going to go into the Ark of the Covenant, and eventually those commands were going to be written on the tablets of our heart. And so we see that Moshe stood in the entrance of the camp. So we're looking at Exodus 32 verses 26, and Moshe stood in the entrance of the camp and said, "Who is for Yahuwah? Come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves to him. And he said to them, "Thus said Yahuwah, Allah of Israel, each one put his sword on his side, pass over to and fro, gate to gate in the camp, and each one kill his brother, and each one his friend, and each one his relative." And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moshe. And about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. And Moshe said, "You are ordained for Yahuwah today, since each one has been against his son and his brother, so as to bring you a blessing today." So understand, this could not have been easy for Levi, because at the end of the day, can you imagine how difficult it was for him to have to kill, for them to have to kill their own relatives, maybe their father, their mother, their brother, their sister, husband, wife. Not husband because they were men, but wife. They take a sword and they're willing to kill. And so this is already what he's saying, that they would be, that they were fierce and they were cruel and they killed a man. And then we spent a lot of time on Yehudah, and Yehudah means praised and it means shoot. And this is Genesis 49, 8 to 12. "And you, Yehudah, your brothers praise you. Your hand is on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children bow down to you." So you see, his hand was on the neck of the enemies. So Father was going to be able to give favor to Yehudah to be able to destroy their enemy. The kingship in Israel came from Yehudah. Yehudah is a lion's cub. From the prey you have gone up. My son, he bowed down, he crouched like a lion, and like a lion, who does rouse him? And so in Revelation 5 verse 5, we saw that the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah is worthy. The scepter shall not turn aside from Yehudah, nor an inscriber, lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him is the obedience of the people. So understand, Revelation 5 verse 5 talks about how there's going to be the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah, and he's the one that was worthy to be able to open the scrolls. And so who is that? Yeshua. And where does Yeshua come from? Yeshua comes from the tribe of Yehudah. Interesting. Yehudah is also the tribe where, if you take the name Yehudah, it's Yehudah Yod Hey Vav Dalet Hey. Yeshua comes from the fourth tribe. It's the fourth tribe, and the Dalet is the door, which is the fourth tribe. And if you remove the Dalet, the door, from Yehudah, you come back to the name of Yahuwah. So where you write the name Yud Hey Vav Dalet Hey, remove the door. Who is the door? Yeshua. Yeshua is the door back to the Father. And if you remove the Dalet out of Yod Hey Vav Dalet Hey, you come back to the Father's name, which is Yahuwah. And that's why the Father said in Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 to 21. Let's read it quickly, because this is just coming up to me as I'm speaking here. The Father is just giving revelation. In Exodus chapter 23 says, "See, I'm sending a messenger before you to guard you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Be on guard before him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he is not going to pardon your transgressions." So who is the angel that is not going to pardon transgressions? None other than Yahushua himself. My name is in him. So interesting how Yahushua comes from the tribe of Yehudah, and it's in the tribe of Yehudah. Yehudah is the only tribe that carries the Father's name. And Abba Yahuwah says, my name will be in him. And so Yahushua comes from the tribe of Yehudah, which is the fourth tribe. This is how the Father gave me the revelation of his name. In the name of Yehudah was where the Father revealed his name to me, because that is when he said to me, go and look up the name of Yehudah, and it's Yud Hey Vav Dalet Hey for Yehudah. And so the Dalet is the door, and Yeshua is the door back to the Father. Remove the door, and what are you left with? Yahuwah, Yud Hey Vav Hey. Very simple how to know his name. His name is in the tribe of Yehudah, because from Yehudah is going to come the Son, Yahushua. But then people want to argue these things about the name and how to say the name, and it's not like this and it's not like that. But these revelations are all put there. It's very easy to be able to see. It's from this tribe that's going to come the scepter. It's from this tribe that he has chosen, the one that is going to open the scrolls, the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah that's going to open the scrolls. Verses 9 and 10 shows the kingly line was promised to come through Yehudah. And so the Lion of Yehudah, Yahushua, would be born from this tribe. And in Psalm 2, verses 8 to 9, he's given all authority. And so Psalm 2 is the most powerful psalm, where it talks about kiss the Son. If you do not kiss the Son, beware that he doesn't smite you. And so we had a look at the Psalm 2, and all authority is given to him, because it is the Father who has given him all authority. And he's the one that comes from this tribe of Yehudah, that it's the kingly line. The kingly line, Yehudah was the tribe that was to remain faithful. And so because they were to remain faithful, it was from there that was going to come the line that would be the line by which Yeshua was going to come through David. And so if you look at Psalm 2, and it says, ask me, and I shall make the nations your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possession. Break them with a rod of iron, dash them with pieces like a potter's vessel. And now be wise, O sovereigns, be instructed, you rulers of the earth. Serve Yahuwah with fear and trembling. Kiss the chosen. Who is the chosen? Yeshua. Lest he be enraged, and you perish in the way. For soon his wrath is to be kindled. Blessed are all those taking refuge in him. So see, we take refuge in him. So all authority is given to him. We also had a look at Daniel 7:13-14, and here we see the kingdom of Yeshua is in Daniel. And then we had a look at Isaiah chapter 42 from verses 1-4. He is the chosen one that has the Ruach, the firstborn of the resurrection. So we had a look at that in Isaiah 42 verses 1-4, that he's the chosen one and that has the Ruach, and he was born, and he's the one who's going to be the resurrection. We also had a look at Zechariah 9 verses 9, the Messiah coming on a donkey, in humility, a servant. And then we had a look at John 12:12-16, where we saw that he paid the price, his blood was shed for us, and you see him, he's the one that is the one goes riding on a donkey, and they hail him as king. Then we had a look at Zebulun, and Zebulun, exalted means exalted habitation, also means to exalt, to dwell, to reside, and to dwell with. And so Zebulun dwells at the seashore. He is for a haven for ships, and his border is unto Sidon, which is Lebanon, Mediterranean coast of Lebanon. And now, isn't it interesting, like I said last week, this land wasn't even taken because, there was some, when they crossed over to the other side of the River Jordan, they were supposed to take land, and this Joshua was supposed to have taken Lebanon, and Joshua was disobedient by not taking Lebanon. Lebanon is part of their inheritance of the land of Israel. The whole land of Lebanon belongs to Israel. So then we have a look and we see Issachar, there is recompense from the root. He will bring reward, to lift up, to bear, to support, and to sustain. And so Issachar is a strong donkey lying between two burdens, and he saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant, and he inclined his shoulder to bear a burden. He became a subject to a slave laborer. So they are really known as the humble servants of the Father. Issachar is able to carry a heavy load. They are able to be servants. They're generally very servant hearts. And then we're going to look tonight. We are going to start with Dan, which is where we finished last week. We're going to look at the tribe of Dan, because Dan is very interesting. Dan do not feature in the end. It's one of the tribes that is not featuring. And so we need to understand, what does he say to Dan? Dan rightly rules his people as one of the tribes of Israel. So Genesis 49 verses 16. Dan rightly rules his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan is a serpent by the way, an adder by the path, that bites the horse's heel so that its rider falls backwards. I waited for your deliverance, O Yahuwah. So you see, Dan is a serpent. So we look and we see Dan would be like a serpent by the way, an adder by the path that bites the horses. So Dan has got a tendency to have a serpent nature. So even though Dan, interesting how Dan means a judge, to contend and to plead. So he's supposed to be a judge that's supposed to contend, that's supposed to plead. And isn't it interesting? Because when we have a look, and we're going to look at Judges, the book of Judges, who was a mighty judge that raised up from the tribe of Dan, none other than Samson. So let's go look at Judges chapter 13. So if we go to Judges chapter 13, and we have a look and we see Judges chapter 13 verses 2, and it says, "And there was a certain man from Zorah of the clan of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had not borne." So you see, Samson's father's name was Manoah, and she also battled to bear a child. And so then in verses 6 we see, verse 5, "For looking you are conceiving, for look, you are conceiving and bearing a son. Let no razor come upon his head, for the youth is a Nazarite to allure from the womb on. And he shall begin to save Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." And the woman came and spoke to her husband, saying, "A man of allure came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of a messenger of allure, very awesome, but I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not declare to me his name. And he said to me, See, you are conceiving and bearing a son, and now drink no wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean food, for the youth is a Nazarite to allure from the womb to the day of his death." So you see, this was none other than who? This was going to be able to be Samson. And so if we look in verse 24 of chapter 13, "So the woman bore a son and called his name Shimshon. So it's Samson, Shimshon. And the child grew, and Yahuwah blessed him. And the spirit of Yahuwah began to move him, Mahaneh Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. And so here we see that he was set apart from the womb to be a Danite, to raise up, to become a judge for the father. But what was the problem that came with Shimshon? What was Shimshon's problem? What was Samson's problem? You see, this very problem that speaks about over here, Dan is a serpent by the way, an adder by the path that bites the horse's heel so that its rider falls backwards. So you see, at the same time, there is a serpent nature within Dan. So even Dan was supposed to be able to be a tribe that was supposed to raise up to bring justice, to judge. But what does it do? They have a serpent nature, because now if we have a look at Judges chapter 16 from verses 1, and it says, "Shimshon went to Azar and saw a woman there, a whore, and went into her." So already you see here a man that cannot control his serpent nature. He cannot control the serpent nature that is within him. And so then we look at verse 3, "And now Shimshon lay until midnight, and rose at midnight, and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 gate posts, and pulled them up with the bar, and put them on his shoulders, and took them to the top of the hills, and faced Hebron. And it came to be afterwards that he loved a woman in the Wadi Sorek, whose name was Delilah." And so this is the problem with this Shimshon, was the problem that was with Samson was he had a problem with his flesh. And the problem in the flesh was the lust of the flesh with woman, because he couldn't take charge of his serpent nature. And so then we basically have a look and we see that then if you're going to read the whole of Judges chapter 16, that then he falls in love with Delilah, but Delilah is set up by the Philistines to take Samson down because they want to understand what is his power. And then Samson really makes fun of his of the power that was given him by the Father, because it was really, because he was a Nazarite, he wasn't allowed to cut his hair, and this is where the power was that the Father gave him because of his obedience, and he needed to be obedient to the Father in that which the Father wanted to do in his life in order to be able to be a judge to deliver the people from the hands of the Philistines. But what did he do? Because of the lust of his flesh, eventually he tells Delilah the secret. They bulge out his eyes, and we have a look and we see in verse 20, and it said, she said, the Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. And he awoke from his sleep and said, let me go out as before at other times and shake myself loose. But he did not know that Yahuwah had turned aside from him, and the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Azar and bound him with bronze shackles, and he became a grinder in the prison. And then eventually his hair starts growing back, and he asks the Father one last time to be able to help him, and eventually he's able to break down the place where they hold him captive, and the whole place comes tumbling down, and he's able to kill a lot of the Philistines. But do you see what was his big problem? The serpent nature that is there. And then if we have a look at we have a look and see how the Father, why does he then not choose the Danites? Why does he come up against Dan? In Dan chapter 18 verses 30 to 31, it says, and the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved images in Yochanan, son of Gershom, son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe. And Dan, until the day the land was taken into exile, and they set up for themselves the carved images of Micah, which he had made all the days that the house of Eloah was in Shiloh. So he made an idol. They were responsible for setting up idols, and and carved images. They were responsible for doing all of that. So because of this, we have a look and we see that the Father does not choose the tribe of Dan. Because look and see, if we go to Revelation chapter 7, in Revelation chapter 7, when we look at the tribes that are listed there, it's Yehudah, it's Reuben, it's Gad, it's Asher, it's Naphtali, it's Manasseh, it's Shimon, it's Levi, it's Issachar, it's Zebulon, it's Joseph, and it's Benjamin. And there's no Dan. Dan does not feature. And so at the end of the day, Dan is going to be removed because of the fact that they were this tribe that was led by the serpent nature, and therefore they, instead of them being able to be the judge and to be able to stand and judge righteously with the Torah, with the word of Yahuwah, no, instead they would be given to their serpent nature. Gad means a troop, to invade, attack. Genesis 49 verses 19 says, Gad, a raiding band, raids him, but he raids its hill. Because they were on the east side of the Jordan, they were vulnerable to the attack from the south side. They were vulnerable to the attack by the Moabites on the south of them. And so we have a look and we see that Gad, Father says that Gad is a raiding band, raids him by the raids its hill. And what does Gad mean? Gad means a troop. It means to invade. It means attack. So he's either going to become a troop, otherwise, like I said, he stood at a place of where he could be invaded, and he would have been invaded by the Moabites to the south of them. Asher means happy, to pronounce happy, call blessed, be made happy. So Asher, in Genesis 49 verses 20, Asher is rich and he gives words of elegance. And so Asher is known to be able to give words of elegance. Sorry, not Asher. Asher is rich and gives delicacies of a sovereign. He gives delicacies of a sovereign. It's Naphtali that is the deer let loose. He gives words of elegance. So it's Naphtali. So Naphtali means wrestling, to wrestle. And it's Naphtali is a deer let loose and he gives words of elegance. And so Asher gives delicacies of a sovereign. Asher gives delicacies of a sovereign. And then Jospeh. And so Jospeh, we have a look at. Jospeh has again a huge blessing, just like Yehudah. Interesting. Yehudah going to be symbolic of the one tribe, of the tribe of Yehudah, and eventually Jospeh from Ephraim going to be symbolic of the 12 tribes, of the 10 tribes, the 10 lost tribes that's going to go, is going to be symbolic of the house of Ephraim. And how interesting that also part of the tribes at the end, Ephraim is not there. Because Ephraim is integrated into the tribes. And so Jospeh is an offspring of a fruit-bearing tree, an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree by a fountain. His branches run over a wall. So do you see? It's a fruit-bearing tree. So out of Jospeh, there's going to be fruit. There's going to be fruit that's going to come forth. And that's why Joseph's life, from Jospeh, is going to come double portion blessing, because at the end of the day, Joseph's 2 firstborn sons are going to be taken in to the house of Israel as becoming 2 of the tribes that get added in on top of Jospeh. And is an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree, an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree. By a fountain, his branches run over a wall. And the archers had bitterly grieved him and shot at him and hated him. So this is the one thing that comes with Jospeh. What has come with Jospeh? Jospeh was hated by his own brothers. And it's so interesting because Jospeh is symbolic of the tribe of Ephraim, which is the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And those are the ones that represent those of the nations at the moment. And they are hated by their own brother Judah, because Judah in the end was the one who sold his brother out. And so at the end of the day, Judah today, right now, at this moment, in the land of Eretz Israel, will not allow the house of Israel, which is made up of the 10 lost tribes, to return, because there is a hatred still towards this brother that they will not combine. So they are making up their own tribes. They're making up their own tribes. They're not going according to what the Father is doing, because the Father will raise up his own tribes. And there is a hatred that is there. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov. So you see, even though his own brothers came up against Jospeh, and even though Jospeh had to face Jezebel, and even though Jospeh had to face the going into jail for a crime that he did not commit, yet he was faithful to the Father, because the Father's hand was upon him, and he carried the Father's favor. And so, even in the dispersion, the house of Israel, as they return back to the Father, they will carry a blessing, and they will have the Father's favor, because they will return back to the Father. They will bow their knee. They will come back to the Father. They will come back to the Father's ways, and they will carry his blessing. And there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Wow. there is the shepherd. So who is the shepherd that's going to be over Joseph? Who is the shepherd that's going to reveal himself to the house of Israel, which is eventually the house of Ephraim? And remember, we had a look at this. And we had a look at it in Ezekiel chapter 37. Well, remember when it talks about the two sticks becoming one, where we had a look at Ezekiel chapter 37 is when the dry bones that need to come together, and this is exactly where we are now, being able to see Father gathering his lost tribes, Father bringing in this house, Father bringing the house all together to become one house. He's gathering his lost tribes. And it says in Ezekiel 37 verses 16, and you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it for Yehudah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Jospeh, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. So do you understand? The house of Israel was split. The house of Israel was split in the 10 tribes that went up north, that was led by Jeroboam, and then you got Rehoboam, which was the son of Solomon, that led the 2 tribes, which would have been Judah and Benjamin, that stayed together. And so it was already Judah that was protecting Benjamin, and then Judah and Benjamin stayed together, and the other 10 tribes go up north until eventually they get dispersed into the nations of the world. And now the Father is busy with the gathering, bringing them in. And look at what he says. Look at what he says over here. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov, which is Abba Yahuwah. The mighty one is El Shaddai. El Shaddai is the one that is having to reveal himself to them. He is the mighty Shin. He is El Shaddai that's going to beat in their hearts by the shepherd, because it says there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Who is the stone? The cornerstone. The cornerstone is none other than Yahushua, and he is the mighty shepherd, and he is the shepherd that is revealing himself to the house of Joseph, which is the house of Ephraim. And right now, this is what he is busy doing, revealing himself, bringing them back, revealing the shepherd. Because you see, if it wasn't for Yahushua bringing them back into the fold, they would have been lost. So they're not lost. Remember what Yahushua said, I came for the lost tribes of the house of Israel. A man went out and bought a field for the treasure that was in the field. He bought the whole field, but it was for the treasure that was in the field. And who is the treasure? The treasure is that house of Israel, the scattered house of Israel abroad in the nations that lost their identity, that lost their inheritance, that lost their stand, that lost their identity, their makeup, that no longer do they even know that they are part of a house that they are coming back into covenant with. So that is why this is the shepherd, the one who is gathering the sheep. He's gathering the lost sheep. He is the shepherd that's gathering the lost sheep, and he's the stone that the builders rejected. But yet he will become the cornerstone for the house of Israel, of the house of Ephraim. From the El of your fathers who helps you, and by the mighty who blesses you with blessings of the heavens from above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors up to the limit of the everlasting hills. They are on the head of Jospeh. Wow. And on the crown of him who was separated from his brothers. Wow. How interesting. How interesting. On the head is the crown, and the crown is the shin of El Shaddai. Wow. And on the head of those who are of the lost tribes of the house of Israel. Now that is a prophetic word of what the Father just did at the last feast of Shavuot. He sealed his people with the shin. So he's bringing in this house of Israel, this lost tribes, this Ephraim that's from the house of Joseph. And on the crown of the head of him who was separated from his brothers. So you see, he's the one that is interesting. Look and see. It's Joseph that was separated from his brothers. And it's the house of Israel, Ephraim, that has been separated from his brothers. They have been in the dispersion and they've been separated from the house. They are the lost, the son, the prodigal son that went into the nations, that took his inheritance, squandered it. But now he's coming back into the house, and the father is standing and he's watching for that prodigal son. He's watching for that lost son that's gone into the world, that's gone into the nations, is waiting for him to come back. And when he comes back, he gives him a double portion blessing, because he's the one who's going to give him the ring of the covenant. He's going to give him the robe of righteousness. He's going to give him the shoes. He's going to kill the fatted calf for him, and he brings him into the house with him to have a blessing. He's got the shoes to go forth and to be able to bring the rest of his tribe, the rest of those brothers and sisters out there that are lost, that have lost their way in the covenant, to bring them back. And he's got an authority. He's got the robe that's been given him. He's got the covenant. He's got the ring of the covenant that has been given him. And he killed, the father killed a fatted calf for him. And what does he do? He provokes his older brother in the house to jealousy. The older brother complains and says, why did you not kill the fatted calf for me? He says, but my son, you've been with me all along, but you've been a slave. You want to be a slave in my house. So when they come, they are the ones that are going to open the eyes of the house of Judah, for them to be able to see their Messiah, their shepherd, the cornerstone whom they rejected. They are going to see and return back to him. And so he says, and who was separated from his brothers. Now, isn't it interesting? That word separated, it actually means Nazir. And that Nazir is consecrated, devoted one, Nazarite, dedicated. He was set apart. So understand, these are the ones that the Father is now setting apart in the nations, because Joseph has to become set apart to be able to come back and to be able to stand and be able to lead his people back to the Father from where they have fallen. And so Joseph was separated to be able to be set apart. And so has the house of Israel, this house of Ephraim that's gone into the nations, that is now awakening. They are being set apart. They are being consecrated. They are being devoted to Abba Yahuwah. They are being set apart. They are being dedicated to the Father, and they are going to receive a double portion blessing, because that is what Joseph receives, a double portion blessing. And understand, what does Joseph mean? Joseph means Yahuwah has added. So Yahuwah will add us to the covenant, to the house where we were cut off, to add, to increase, to join, to add, to be added to. So we will be added back to that covenant, to that house from which we were separated. But we were separated so that we could be consecrated, so that we could be devoted to Abba Yahuwah, and now separated back again. Oh, wow. What an awesome revelation the Father is giving here tonight. And so we have a look then, and we see that then it's the restoration. And remember, Joseph has Ephraim, which means fruitfulness. So this is why there will be a fruitful harvest that's going to come from these lost tribes of the nations. There's a double portion of a fruitful harvest that will come in. And then Manasseh means I shall cause to forget. And so we will be caused to forget the fact that we were separated from our original house, from our original tribe. We were cut off as being just these lost tribes in the nations, and now we are going to be joined back because he will cause us to forget, because now we will be part of the house. Amen. Benjamin. What does Benjamin mean? Benjamin is a wolf that tears in the morning, he eats prey, and at night he divides the spoil. So Benjamin is a wolf that tears in the morning and he eats the prey. Benjamin means son of my right hand. Benjamin is compared to a ravenous wolf who is mighty in battle but was also cruel. And so we have a look. We see two men that from the tribe of Benjamin, that we see what they have done. And so we look and we see. Now listen to what he says. Benjamin is compared to a ravenous wolf who is mighty in battle but also cruel. So he's mighty but he's cruel as well. And he also, we have a look and see. So in 1 Samuel, let's go look and see 1 Samuel. In 1 Samuel chapter 9. Who are we going to look at? None other than King Saul. So there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, and of Tzoror, son of Becheroth, son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a son whose name was Shaul, young and handsome, and there was not a more handsome man than he among the children of Israel, taller than any of the people by the shoulders and upwards. So here we see King Saul was a Benjamite. Now understand, did he not become a wolf that tears its prey? At the end of the day, here was David playing the harp for him, David trying to console him, and Saul the whole time pursuing him to want to kill him because of the cruelty that was within him. So the whole time, here we see, what is Saul doing? Saul is now, he's king, and David is now wanting to console him by playing this music for him. I mean, Saul was enraged with jealousy over David. And so what does he become? Cruel. And he tried to destroy him. He tried to kill him. And so there's that wolf nature that is there, that you see that he's a ravenous wolf that would want to then destroy him. Now we see another man that was just as, but yet the Father can bring them around. And so who was the other one? Let's have a look at Philippians chapter 3 verses 5. In Philippians chapter 3 verses 5 it says, circumcised the 8th day of the race of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, according to Torah, a Pharisee, according to the order, persecuting assembly, according to the righteousness is in the law, having become blameless. This is none other than Paul. And so if we have a look and we see in Romans chapter 11 verses 1, I say then, has Elohim rejected his people? Let it not be. For I also am of Israel, of the seed of Abraham, and of the tribe of Benjamin. And this is Saul. But Saul, before he became Paul, Shaul, then they gave him the name Paul, but he's Shaul. What was he doing? He was persecuting he was a man that was like a wolf, because he was chasing after the believers and putting them to death. He was the one that put Simon to death, stoned him to death, had him stoned to death. And so at the end of the day, we have a look and we see that these two men came from the tribe of Benjamin. And so we see that there was a wolf that tears in the morning. He eats prey, and at night he divides the spoil. And so interesting about at night he divides the spoil, because what did Saul do to be able to get him to fall? Instead of him being obedient to what Shemuel told him to do, he was more interested in allowing the men to divide the spoil. When he said, kill all the Amalekites, kill all the women, kill all the children, kill all the animals. No, he divided the spoil. No, he kept the best of the animals, kept the best of everything. He wanted to please the people because he wanted to give the people to divide the spoil. And this is what made King Saul fall at the end of the day. And when 1 Samuel chapter 15, the father turns against him, then rebukes him and turns against him. And so all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father spoke to them, and he blessed them, and he blessed each one according to his own blessing. And he commanded them and said to them, I am to gather to my people, bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron and the Hittite, and in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham brought with the field of Ephron and the Hittite as a possession for a burial site. There they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. There they buried Yitzhak and Rivkah, his wife, and there they buried Leah. The field purchased and the cave which is in it from the sons of Heth. And when Yaakov ended commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. Chapter 50, we continue. And Jospeh fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Jospeh commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were completed for him. For so are completed the days of embalming, and the Mitzrayim wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Jospeh spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the hearing of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, See, I'm dying. Bury me in my burial site, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. And now please, let me go up and bury my father and return. And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. And Jospeh went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of the Pharaoh, and the elders of the house, and all the elders of the land of Mitzrayim. And all the house of Jospeh, and his brothers, and his father's house, only their little ones, and their flocks, and their herds, they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, and they lamented there with a great and very heavy lamentation. And he performed 7 days of mourning for his father. And when the inhabitants of the land of the Canaanites saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning for the Mitzrayites. That is why its name was Abel Mitzrayim, which is beyond the Jordan. And his sons did to him as he had commanded them. For his sons brought him to the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from the Ephron the Hittite as a property for a burial site. And after he had buried his father, Jospeh returned to Mitzrayim, he and his brothers, and all who went up with him to bury his father. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, What if Jospeh hates us and pays us back all the evil which we did to him? So do you see how we allow old wounds to come up? My goodness, how long have they now been already living in the land of Goshen, that Joseph provided for them, that Joseph has been with them, that they have dwelt together as a family, but yet look at the distrust. Do you see how we allow the enemy to come and bring division? Do you see how we allow old wounds that we have not healed? They should have healed this by now. They should have been over this by now. They should have trusted their brother by now, to know that their brother wasn't just taking care of them because of their father. Their brother had wept on their neck. Their brother had embraced them. Their brother has fed them in this whole time of famine. But yet at the end of the day, where is the distrust? Do you see how in these last days, brother will turn against brother because of what? Their hearts will wax cold because they will be able to go into bitterness. They will go and take things of the past and go into bitterness. And they sent word to Joseph saying, before your father died, he commanded, saying, so now they will lie. So now they're lying. Are they lying now? This is what you are to say to Joseph. I beg you, please forgive the transgression of your brother and their sin, if they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servant of Eloah, of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. So do you understand? Can you imagine how Joseph has felt? Once again, betrayed. Once again, what is with my brothers now? Do they still don't believe me? Do they still don't believe that I am the one who has forgiven them? And listen to what he says. And his brothers also wept and fell down before his face, and they said, see, we are your servants. And Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of Eloah? So am I in the place of Eloah? Why are you fearing? Who is the one that you should put your trust and your faith in? You see, why do we go into these places of when we go into the past and when we allow old wounds to get to us? It's because we take our eyes off the Father. It's because we start looking at the things of the flesh. It's because we start putting our trust and our faith in the works of the flesh. And this is where the problem comes in. And you intended evil against me, but Eloah intended it for good, in order to do it as it is this day, to keep a great many people alive. So do you see, Joseph has to remind them again, am I in the place of the Father? The Father is the one that has done this. You did it because you were doing it for evil. You had evil ways and you had evil intentions. But even though your intentions were evil, don't worry, because at the end of the day, there was still a Father that was in charge. And even though you meant it for evil, Eloah intended it for good, in order to do it as it is this day, to keep a great many people alive. How many are the people now? They have children and children's children. They are starting to multiply. And now they've been kept alive, because if Joseph had not gone ahead, if Joseph had not been separated, if Joseph had not gone astray, then he would not have been able to keep a bunch of people alive. Oh my goodness, is this prophetic now? Is this prophetic of what the Father's going to do with the house of Israel? If it isn't for the fact that the Father is now going to raise up this lost tribes of the house of Israel in the nations, they are going to have to prepare Goshen places in order to keep the children of the Father alive for those last days that we're going to come into. And now, do not fear. I provide for you and your little ones. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them, to make them feel at peace. He's not going to do them any harm. And Joseph dwelt in Mitzrayim, and he and his father's household. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim 100, double portion, and 10, completion. 100-fold return that he received, hundredfold return that he received on his separation, on everything that he went through, plus the 10 of the completion of divine order, divine spiritual order. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the 3rd generation. and the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were also born on Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am dying, but Allah shall certainly visit you and bring you out of this land, and to the land of which he swore to Avram, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov. And Joseph made the children of Israel swear, saying, Allah shall certainly visit you, and you shall bring up my bones from here. And Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was placed in a coffin in Mitzrayim. And so praise Abba Father. Joseph was not going to stay in Mitzrayim, and Joseph's bones were put in a coffin, and Joseph was taken in across the river Jordan into the promised land. He lies in a place called Shechem, which unfortunately today is Nablus, and that is now in the West Bank because of Israel wanting to give land away and dividing the land constantly. His bones lie in an area which before was Shechem, today it's known as Nablus. And praise Abba Father, Elsie and I had the privilege of being at that grave tomb, of Joseph's grave tomb, to call forth the lost tribes of the house of Israel to return back to the land of Israel, just like Joseph returned. So as his bones returned back to the land, understand, from the time that he was separated from his brothers, he never returned back to the land again. But his bones returned back to the land, and those dry bones shall live. Those are the dry bones that is spoken of in Ezekiel chapter 37. Those dry bones shall live, and breath shall be breathed on them. And Joseph's descendants that come from the tribe of Ephraim, that has been scattered throughout the nations, at that tomb, Abba allowed us to go into the West Bank, to go into Nablus, to sit at Joseph's tomb and call forth those lost tribes that will return back to the land of Israel, where they are in exile, where we are exiled from our promised land. We shall return back to the land of our inheritance at the appointed time. Praise Abba Yahuwah. He will gather us from the four corners of the earth, and he shall once again gather us. We shall be once again gathered back to our covenant home where we belong. Amen. May Abba bless you all. Thank you, Abba Yahuwah. What a powerful word, Father. What a powerful promise. Thank you, Abba Yahuwah, that you gave us the grace in 2010. 2010, 12 years has passed since we sat at that grave. On the 10th of the 10th of 2010, we stood at that grave of Joseph's tomb, where the bones were returned into Shechem. And even though today it might be in enemy territory, it might be in the West Bank, it might belong to a different people, but yet it is still your land. And there is still a covenant that was made with Joseph that must still be fulfilled. Where your lost tribes, those of the house of Israel, shall return to their land, shall be reunited with Judah, and the two sticks shall become one house. And Abba, I know that this is not a work made of man's hands. I have cried many tears in that land, Abba, calling forth your people, where you are raising up your dry bones in this hour. You are breathing life into them, sinews coming upon them, and they are coming alive, and they are returning back to your covenant, where they were cut off, separated, but once again going to be reinstored, going to be restored. And Father, even if it's only going to be when Joshua comes. But yet, we know that we have a promise. We know that we have an inheritance. We know that we have been cut off, but we have been once again grafted back. And I thank you, Father, that Romans chapter 11 says that some branches were broken off so that we could be grafted in. And I know that Joshua himself, who is the shepherd, who is the one that has come to put the shin on the crown of the heads, to bring us back to where we belong, Father. That shin of El Shaddai, the mighty one of Israel. El Shaddai that is beating in our hearts constantly every day as our heart beats. Abba Yahuwah, I pray, help us to be faithful, to bow our knee, to come back to your covenant as we start the journey next week, entering into Exodus, where there's got to be an exodus. There's got to be an exodus to come out of all the religious systems that have kept us bound, and all these worldly systems that have kept us bound, and to return back to you, to your way. And I thank you that Exodus is going to teach us so many valuable lessons, Abba. I can't thank you enough, my Father, for the journey that you have done with us for more than a year in just Genesis alone. And I know that you're going to do a mighty work with us through Exodus. And so I thank you for your faithfulness, for when you started this discipleship training, you said you were going to raise up disciples, Father, and you were going to disciple them, and you were going to give them manna that has come from heaven, and you are faithful, and you do it every week. And I stand in awe of your faithfulness and your goodness. Who am I, Father, but a mere mouthpiece? Because you are the one that opens up the pages of these words to be able to bring manna to your people, all for the glory and the honor of your name. I humble myself before you, my Father, and I say truly, I am nothing and I do nothing, because everything comes from you. And I thank you for it, Father. You are so faithful. Truly you are El Shaddai, the all-sufficient one. Thank you for everything that you have done in carrying us through in this time of this book of Genesis. Such wealth, such jewels that we can take from it. What a powerful foundation you have laid in our lives from this book of Genesis. I praise and I thank you for this in Yeshua's name. Amen.